Hey everyone, welcome again to the live stream. And tonight, we're going to talk about bugs. What else is new? Hey everyone, welcome again to the live stream. And specifically, I'm going to continue with the Bumblebee model, which for the most part looks like it's finished without hair, obviously, and without poly painting. But there's a few things that remain that are bugging me. The mouth parts. They're almost there, but I think there's some detail and some parts that are lacking. So I'd like to tackle that tonight. And then, if possible, I hope to get into the wing muscles at some point. But this would probably be good enough for our purposes for the moment. It's a little bit of guessing going on there, which always bothers me. There's definitely guessing going on with the mouth. But let's take a look at what I have, because I've got some new reference that I didn't have the last time I worked on the mouth. And it's just a couple images, and as usual, they're not great. It's 3 images, but they're better than nothing. The bumblebee mouth is different from the honeybee mouth. So the honeybee mouth, this is honeybee mouth. And there's lots of reference on honeybee mouth because it's one of the more studied insects. Here's an excellent reference to the honeybee mouth parts. And as you can see, it's a lot more complex. It kind of folds, and there's many different parts that come out of it. Luckily, our bumblebee is not as complicated, but there's less reference. So what I have to work with is scanning electron microscope that shows these parts. This is the glossa, otherwise known as the tongue. Here's a close-up of the fibers on the tongue. So this is a close-up of the tongue. And then we have the labial palps right here. And we have a couple other sections right here. I'm not quite sure exactly what this is, but that's what we have. So they have the labial palps, which is like a long flat segment with a joint right here, and then a little nubbity part right here. It looks like a couple joints right there. So that's what I want to add tonight. We also have the maxilla right here, this long part. So in this side view, we can see here's the tongue or the glossa. It's all nice and furry. Here are the palps, and you can see the joint right here and the little nubs at the bottom. And then the maxilla, like these long, sharp, bladed parts. So let's take a look at my 3D model where it stands right now. So I have the glossa right here, which I modeled without fur. I've got a little curve in it, which I might want to get rid of. And then I have the maxilla, but what I don't have is the labial palps, and I'm not really sure how these join up in there. So that's what I kind of want to add. So the other thing I did is I took a look at my 3D scan data. So this is the scan, which is the original basis for the model. So let's see what this has in it. So this looks like it has a bit more information. So we have the maxilla right here, these long bended parts, right? That's right here. And we have, let's zoom over here so it's a little bit easier to see. And then this is the glossa, or the tongue, right here. And then what's difficult to figure out is this is the tongue. We have the labial palps right here, because you can see here's the little nub right here, this part right here. And then we have this segment, and I think there's a joint somewhere around here, but it didn't come through in the scan. So the other thing is that I'd like to see how these parts join in with the inner part of the mouth, which is right here. This, thankfully, is much simpler than the honeybee. Honeybee, this gets like really complex. So, but we have the mandibles that are kind of in the way here. But that's simple. We can just hide the mandibles. I've already got my mandibles, and I'm pleased with the way they look. So really, it's just want to see if we can get these labial palps going, as they say. Is that what they say? I don't know. The mesh looks the way this does because this is actually raw scan data that was given to me by a scientist. So this is what it looks like after it's been put together from photogrammetry, or in some cases they actually use a particle accelerator to make the super scans, super accurate scans, and this scan is better than most that you'll find. And what's cool about it is you can even see the inside parts of the insect right here. So we can get a kind of a cross section of what's going on with the muscles. The hard part is figuring out what all this stuff is, because it's like goo, you know. It's difficult to understand exactly what we're looking at. So it's a bit of a kind of like a detective mystery. We had to kind of look at diagrams, look at photographic reference, look at the 3D scan, and then sort it out. I mean, I've even had like a microscope set up next to my computer. And you would think that's like, okay, well, that's all the answers to everything on the test. But in fact, that's a little bit harder than it sounds, because you still have to kind of figure out what you're looking at. But that's also what I find to be the interesting challenge. I mean, you know, concept designers, God love them, they get to make all this stuff up. The better ones, of course, study anatomy and study science and really learn about what they're looking at. But at the end of the day, you can still wave your hands, especially if you're doing something for Hollywood, because Hollywood does not care. All it has to do is look cool. So if you're doing something for a scientist, it's very different. In that case, it's got to be accurate, or as accurate as possible, as accurate as needed for whatever the project is that you're trying to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to chip away at this a little bit, hiding various parts until I get to see what I want to see. And so, you know, I could hit automatic groups or auto groups, but there's so many little itty bitty parts that it might become a disaster if I did that. So you can see right here, what we can do is let's get away, hide some of these bigger chunks right here. So I know I don't need this, and I don't need that, and all the brains and the goo and the other stuff. ZBrush gives edge loops depending on what your geometry looks like. The best way to get proper edge loops using ZBrush is to prep your model so that you can get decent edge loops. Polygroups are a great way to do that. If you're using Dynamesh and you create some polygroups, it basically around the area where you're trying to do a ZBrush. In other words, if you have an eye, you do a polygroup around the orbital like that, even if it's in Dynamesh, and then ZBrush with the polygroups option on, you'll get better results. The algorithm for ZBrush has gotten a lot better over the past, 4 or 5 versions. So you're getting a lot better than what you used to. But if you don't do anything to prep your model, then you're still kind of gambling, and you could end up with spirals or just not very good edge loops the way you want. So the answer to the question is really, it's like prep your model, and that takes a little bit of practice to sort of understand the personality of ZBrush. The more you work with it, the more you play with it and see what settings will give you the results you want, then you'll be more confident. If I was going to do topology for a character that needed to be rigged and animated for like a movie or a game or something, then I would do hand retopology, because in that case you really want your topology to be something that a rigging a rigging artist or an animation artist can work with. If it's not, you're going to hear about it. But if you're doing something like a bug or something that's a sculpt, where you're not deforming the flesh over joints and blend shapes, etc., then you can get away with less than perfect topology. It just has to be good enough to go with the grain of the sculpt that you're trying to do. That's basically the way I look at it. And if you're basically a modeler and a texture artist or a digital sculptor, and you don't do rigging or animation, it's good, but you want to work in an industry where you have to work with people who do, then it's a good idea to learn some rigging and learn some animation. Not to the point where you need to get a job at Pixar being lead animator, just enough that you understand how keyframes work, how deformers work, whether it's blend shapes or whatever, morph targets. You want to know, have a good idea how painting joint weights work and all that kind of stuff, and even doing a bit of animation so you know what you have to work with. Just so that makes you a better modeler and somebody that's easier to work with when it comes to working on a team. Oops. Actually, that is what I want to do. I want to hide that. Okay, so that was just part of the mandible, and then I have a little part of the mandible right here. Yeah, I did manual retopology for many, many years. Quad Draw and Maya was my preferred method, or, I done Topo Gun and all that kind of stuff. And nowadays, I still use either Quad Draw or, the Z modeler with edge extrude with snapping to the surface is actually really good in ZBrush. So those are both good methods. I used to do retopology in ZBrush with the Z-sphere method, which we were talking about last week, which was excruciating and not something I recommend unless you like insanity. But there's plenty of times, there's a lot of dogma that you hear in the industry, and it usually comes from people who either only do one thing or don't have as much experience as they think that they do. The dogma will be you must do retopology like this, or you must do retopology like that. Well, you must do hand retopology. Well, the problem is sometimes not every job you're doing is going to be lead character in a game or lead character in a feature film. If you're doing something, if I'm doing something like title work, which I do a lot of stuff for, my turnaround time on a model could be something like an evening. I get a model, and it's not something that's necessarily going to be animated or deformed a whole lot, maybe just a little bit. In that case, or when I worked on the opening title sequence for The Stand, Stephen King's The Stand, the TV series, the most recent incarnation. And I had to do something like 50 models. They were all scan data, and I had basically like a week to do it. And in that case, that's a case where ZRemesh is your best friend. A lot of ZRemesh, a lot of Dynamesh, and that kind of thing. I did not have time to do hand retopology on that, but for the most part, I needed to do photorealistic props based on props in the show that needed to be textured and animated very simply for the title works. The problem wasn't the model so much, except for one typewriter, which nearly drove me insane. It was the turnaround time was very, very short, because a lot of times these people, they want to just, the directors want to see it. Even for something like Wednesday, the title sequence for Wednesday, which was a lot of fun to work on. Super fast turnaround, and then Tim Burton's going to be looking at it, which is kind of freaky to think about. But those are going to be animated, and sometimes I'm doing the animation and sometimes I'm not. In those cases, the main thing was getting the model looking good, but also getting the UVs to look good, to work well with texturing and that kind of thing. And again, the turnaround times are like really, really short. So, most artists, if you're starting out, you're not going to be getting a lead character artist job right out of the bat, especially these days with the way the industry is. More often than not, you're going to be doing a lot of this kind of stuff, cleaning up scans and that kind of thing, before you get to really work on the hero models. Quad remesher in what? I use Quad Draw in Maya or Z remesher in ZBrush. Is Quad remesher I'm not familiar with that term. Is that in Maya or Blender or another ZBrush term that I'm not aware of? Or is that a plugin? I mean, quads is usually what I want to do a remesh out of. Hi, Newt. Blender. I've only used Blender a little bit, so I can't speak about that. Siba, they are insert in the pre-mentum. Can you expand upon that comment? Am I missing something is there something that you're talking about in terms of honeybee or bumblebee mouth parts that I'm missing? It's a Blender add-on. I can't speak to it, but I'm guessing it's kind of a standard quad remesher. I mean, they work in similar ways, you know. So you would have to, I'd have to play with it a little bit. Blender is pretty cool. I like Blender. You know, the problem is that still a lot of my work is ZBrush and Maya, and I love ZBrush. Maya is okay. I would like to do more and more Blender because it's becoming closer to an actual feasible production tool. I mean, you know, Flow won an Oscar, right? So it's hard to argue with that. So my goal actually with this Bumblebee model is I'm in the process of making it something that I can rig and animate in Blender just to force myself to learn Blender. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do is let's turn off line here. Let's do split hidden. Just so I have this as its own thing, and then I have this right here. All right, I'm going to look up. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the stuff that I'm not as concerned about or that I know. So I have something for the maxilla that are okay. This is sort of my rough sculpting model. What about Z Texturator? Okay, what is Z Texturator? I don't have an opinion on it because I haven't used it. I will say something about beware of using too many plugins and add-ons, because if you get a job at a studio, chances are they may not have those same plugins or add-ons. And if you go to the people who are running the IT department and you say, I need this plugin or add-on, they might say, tough luck, you're not getting it. We don't want to install it, or it's out of date. So I would say it's a good idea to learn your core tools as much as possible, because a lot of times the plugins will be a slight improvement on an existing tool. The other frustration I have with scripts and plugins is a lot of times the user or the people who write the plugins will kind of like lose interest in supporting it and move on to something else, or they'll get a job or they'll have a kid, and you'll never hear from them again. This is the problem that I had when I was starting out with Maya and everybody's using Mel scripts. You'd build up all this library of Mel script to do everything that you needed to do, and then a Mel script would stop working, or they'd do a new version of Maya and the Mel script would be out of date, and the person who wrote the Mel script would just disappear off the face of the earth, and you'd be like stuck. And so at that point, that happened to me enough times. I was just like, you know what, I'm going to do the best I can with what I have and learn those tools as well as I can, so I'm not dependent on someone flaking out. I'm currently a student and I'm doing very heavily armored character. I've been blocking for 2 months and there's still some small niche pieces in my character that I have to model. Yeah, that'll happen. Try doing a beetle sometime. I had to present at the end of next month to my lecturer and principal. Okay, well, I would say stock up on coffee. It's like Substance Painter. We'll get some more materials and other stuff. So it's like Substance Painter in Blender? Is that what you're saying? Okay, so we had a comment that it was inset in the prementum, and I think they're referring to the comment was referring to the labial palps. So if we're looking at bee mouths, doing just a quick search on prementum, I get this. Ugh, I hate that. Yeah, whatever. Problem is, a lot of this terminology for mouth parts for insects are used on a wide variety of insects, including ones that are nothing like the one we're looking at. So here's a bee chewing parts of a honeybee diagram with the prementum right here. So it looks like if we're looking right here, this is the labial palp on a honeybee, and this is the prementum. So it looks like they're attached on either side of the glossa right here. And then we have, it looks like the glia in the honeybee is similar to the maxilla on the, okay. So it looks like then our labial palps are going to be coming out of here. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so Valley Girl, what school are you going to? If I might ask, if you want to share. You don't have to unless you want to. Let's take a look at, okay, so this is what I want right here. I'm going to do a selection around here. This is the end of the labial palp. And then I'm going to do Control-Shift-X. And what this does is this grows a selection by one polygon at a time. This is a good way of getting at something if you can't quite get to it through all the other muck that's going on. So I'm just expanding this until, and then I'll hide this part because this looks like it's part of the maxilla. No, that's actually hard to say. Yeah, I was right actually. Let's hide this again. Sorry, but that question was for Newt. He was saying that he has to present his model to his lecturer and principal next month. Well, At least you're not showing it to James Cameron. That would be a lot scarier. When I was teaching ZBrush at Nome in Los Angeles, which I taught there for many years, it was a lot of fun. But I get students, in the extension classes from all kinds of backgrounds. So I'd have the regular students who are there working on a certificate or degree program, and then I would have other people who were taking the class, just as a one-off. And in that case, you get a lot of professionals, and I would get some people, really amazing people. And one of the guys, and I can't remember his name, and I wouldn't give his name anyways because it's not fair. But he's a really cool guy. But he's a much older dude, and he was taking ZBrush. He was a storyboard artist and a production designer, and he actually worked directly with Steven Spielberg. I mean, he was like Steven Spielberg's right-hand man who interpreted a lot of the storyboards for Steven Spielberg, and he did this for many years. And he's a really cool guy, like I've said about 7 times. And I remember I had a student in the class, a young guy who's taking for the certificate program, and like the first 3 classes, when I asked to see the homework for the assignment, which would be like, model a skull or something like that, or prop or whatever, he always had some weird excuse, like, oh, the computer crashed, oh, I didn't have time, oh, I got too busy with other homework and that kind of stuff. And it started to get on my nerves because I'm teaching this stuff at nights or on the weekends, and during the day I was working like Bad Robot at the time. So, you don't get a chance when you're working in production to give an excuse ever. It just doesn't happen. And so I was getting annoyed with this student, and I asked the older guy who worked with Steven Spielberg, was like, what would happen if you showed up to a meeting with Spielberg and you said, well, I didn't have it because my computer crashed, or, I ran out of time, or, whatever. And he just said you would just be asked to leave and you would never work again. So that's the harsh reality of working in the industry, is like, you got to find a way to make it work within the deadline. And it's got to be good too. There's just no 2 ways about it, So it's like, if you got a pressing deadline, you just have to find a way to make it work. There's just no other way. Okay, so that's okay. It's a little vague, but it's there. So let's do split hidden again, just so I've isolated this part. And I'm going to duplicate it, and let's see if we can kind of stick the duplicate somewhere close to where I think it should be on my model. And we'll go from there. The idea is to clean it up and to make it decent enough topology so that we can turn it into something usable. I think for this particular model, this animation is not going to focus on the mouth parts. So I like to get them as accurate as possible. I know the guy I'm doing this for would like it as accurate as possible, but not necessarily being totally, as perfect as we can do. Sorry, working and talking at the same time doesn't always work for me. Okay. So I'm eyeballing it. I realize it's not super accurate. But if we're going to say inset on the oh yeah, Paul Gabriel is a great guy. He's a good friend of mine. I've known him for a very long time. Excellent teacher too. He knows the hard stuff. Well, he knows all the stuff better than anyone because he worked side by side with O'Fair for so long. I know he's working with the Maxon team. I have to say, I do, without sounding obsequious, I do think the Maxon team is doing a fine job with the latest updates to ZBrush. I was nervous at first, as everybody was, because it's a big company and it's kind of unfamiliar, a little bit scary because they're so used to ZBrush being, this little program that was made by a very small team now being taken over by a larger company. But they've done a good job. I was talking to one of the Maxon reps at the IMAG event in Paris, and I asked him how Maxon was adapting to ZBrush, or how they were finding working with ZBrush. And he basically said that the main thing they're dealing with is the fact that the other applications like Cinema 4D and that kind of stuff, they want them to be as good as ZBrush. And so ZBrush is becoming their gold standard for how the other applications work, which is a kind of a cool thing to say. But it's accurate, might be a matter of opinion, but they're definitely serious about keeping ZBrush being as good as it is. Okay, so yeah, insect mouthparts are a nice bear, but they're so cool. I mean, they're just endless sources of inspiration. Okay, cool. Thank you, Siba, for the information. It's kind of what I was suspecting. The thing that I'm having the difficulty with is, depending on the diagram or the book that you're looking at, sometimes they'll use different terms. Like, for instance, I see Galea a lot when I'm talking. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong, Galea or whatever, with honeybee mouthparts, but I haven't really seen it in any of my descriptions of the bumblebee mouthparts, where I have seen maxillary, like in the diagram that I'm using right now, but I haven't seen, that's the terminology it's using. Let me see if I can bring this up again. All right. So here's our labial palp, and this, I believe, is the stipes would be basically like up here, right? And I know I'm pronouncing all of that wrong. And this one does not show the maxilla, as far as I can tell. It's just showing the glossa and the labial palps. It's too bad that it's cut off right here. And then here we see the maxilla above, and we see the palps below, and it looks like they're connected down here, and we have the glossa. So I'm thinking that they're going to come out something like this. The one I was working on for a really long time is the orchid bee. I've kind of probably got that backwards now. And that one's a lot of fun, but as you can imagine, it gets really, really complex. So what I'm going to do is, let's play with this a little bit and just hope for the best. So I'm going to do a Dynamesh just to kind of clean it up, and then we'll do a Z-remesh. So this should be interesting. Let's save this real quick. You have a request. Is it? Hopefully, it's insect related. I did a dragonfly wing last week based on requests, so it depends on what it is. But let me see if I do 128. That's going to be not nearly enough resolution. That is giving me 23,000, so that's pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here with the inflate brush and just kind of close this stuff off a little bit. I'm trying to clean up the geometry without losing too much detail, which is always kind of tricky. I think this opening right here is an artifact of the scan. I don't think that's part of the actual anatomy, so I'm going to close it up. If I'm wrong, we can fix it later. I can check your ZBrush work. You have, are you talking about models or like renders, images in the portfolio? Yeah, another person who does a live stream that's really gives great feedback on personal work is Thomas Wittelsbach. Even though he's known for doing jewelry, he also does portfolio reviews and that kind of thing. By the way, if you're trying to Zynomish, you get something like this. A couple things you can try. It's just basically the algorithm struggling with some kind of problem with the geometry. So you can try maybe inflating a little bit and see if that fixes the problem. Or you can also lower the resolution a little bit. Sometimes, yeah, that fixed the problem here. So I'm going to smooth this out. I don't know if you can paste URLs into the chat. I think it's filtered out. I'm just going to kind of... You can send me an email to my address, bloopatone. Actually, what you should do, I don't need to be getting more spam there. If you want to send me a link to my Instagram, it's at bloopatone01, and send me like a DM. Just cleaning up some of these artifacts here and hoping that I'm somewhere close. Okay. So let's simplify this a little bit more. I'm going to store an undo part here and then go in here to ZBrush and let's do, let me see, it's only 11,000, so I'm going to keep it at the same. And just to kind of clean it up a little bit. Get rid of these spikies because I don't think these spikies are in the actual. And then a lot of this detail I think is artifacts. It's not necessarily useful detail. It's great detail if I was making stuff up, but it'd be nice if I had an actual image. That part, that clear image. Let's see, it's ZBrush by half. a couple times, and let's do project history. Okay, let's take a look here. I got some geometry to work with. Now I'm going to try and work off the images as opposed to the scan. So I think I go back and forth with the Dynamesh thing. ZBrush, working with ZBrush is not a linear process. There's no reason why you can't go back and forth as you're working between things like Dynamesh and ZRemesher, or Sculptress also is very useful. So what I might do is let's do a little Sculptress just for fun. I'm going to shrink this down a little bit. And I'm going to go to Geometry, and let's go to delete lower. And I'm going to hold the Shift key and turn on Sculptress. And this, of course, for those of you who may not know, Sculptress dynamically subdivides depending on the brush that you're using, where you're brushing, so you can add some details. I like to use it in conjunction with Dynamesh quite a bit. And so I can also use it to erase stuff. Like if I use the Shift key, I can use it to erase this lumpy pretty easily, and then maybe use inflate. I can turn off. I only turned that on so I could see what was going on. Basically have like this kind of thing. Now mine is, I have mine sort of bent as opposed to straight like this, so I'm kind of extrapolating here. And not worrying about detail too much, just trying to get the forms in a good place. Thicken up this connection here, and something like that for the moment. And then what we have is let's do this. I'm going to unbend this. Whoops. Let's go into mask glass. Oh, yes, we know. Sorry, I know I should just do that with the old. Sorry, I should do it old. I'm doing old school method here. Let's do this. There we go. And then we have a nice soft bend to it. I'm just holding the control key and dragging while I have the gizmo active. Maybe the old school method's better. There we go. That's the nice thing about Sculptress. You can just erase weird stuff like that. And so what I'm going to do is try and match my reference here. A little bit better. And so I'm going to go up to like this. It's like the trick is, it's not so much the sculpting. The sculpting is easy. It's just moving stuff around on a screen. The hard part is trying to understand what you're looking at, because every insect is going to have its own, every insect species is going to have its own personality as to how mouth parts or eyes or whatever are arranged, and so you have to kind of spend some time getting to know how this particular insect is doing that. So my scan data had this long skinny thing. My images, I have sort of a flat elongated piece. I'm going to go with the image because I trust this image is a bit more intact than my scan data, and I don't know what all this stuff is up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and mimic this shape and hope for the best. You can contact me through my website. I just don't want to put my email in bloopatone.com. It's also listed on my on the opening page, and also bloopatone.com. So you can go to my website, and then there should be an email link there to send me a contact. It's basically an ArtStation site, so you can send me a message through ArtStation. But yeah, there's a contact link right down here. You just send a link and send me a message. That's probably the best way to do it. Yeah, so I'm basically kind of doing this right here, is this right here. And then we have the joint right there, and then we have these parts right here. So that's kind of what I'm working on. And this is going to end up being one of those memes, how it started and how it's going. It looks like chewing gum at the moment, but so I'm going to turn off Sculptress and do ZBrush. got an error, so we're going to go to mesh integrity, fix mesh, see your mesh. I'm going to leave that blob there for now. I'll lower the Z intensity of my move brush. It's a little bit more gentle. And try and keep that sort of wedge going. It's important to remember where the inside is and the outside. So I'm going to draw a line here to mimic this kind of the spine here, just so I don't get lost. It's looking slightly convincing. I don't know if the proportions are quite right, but we can fix that. Let's do another Z mesh. So getting the geometry nice and low poly makes it easier to smooth these things out. And then I want to kind of look at this shape right here. This is kind of cool right here. I mean, you know, at least what I'm seeing, hopefully it's something close to reality. It's kind of like a hinge that scoops in here like this, and we have more of a Now I'm going to subdivide this. Maybe do little clay tubes, low Z intensity, just to kind of sand it down a little bit. Okay, so let's see how it looks in relation to what else is going on here. So I kind of jammed it in over here as best as possible. And I don't have a whole lot of detail on the stipes here at this part of the pre-nude. Let's take a look. Pre-Mentum, the fresh maker. Let's see this one. So this is right here. Looks like the palps, and they're inserted right here, and this is the glossa. Okay, let's take a look. Two-factor authentication. Okay, your message is not shown up yet, so hopefully it'll show up soon. All right, we'll give it a few minutes to show because the email hasn't shown up yet for whatever reason. Okay, so as far as I can tell, I mean, it's getting there. Dare to be vague, as usual. We can also take a look at some of the other reference I have for honeybees. Yeah, so basically, this right here is the labial palp. So you can see there's the little joint and there's a little two nubs at the end, and this is the insertion on either side of the glossa. So I'm feeling fairly confident that that is correctish. In terms of the actual joining part right here, we're going to have to flub it a little bit, but I think that's a reasonable estimation. So let's rename this. We'll call it labial palps. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Subtool Master to mirror it over onto the other side. So go into Z Plugins, Subtool Master, and I'm going to choose Mirror, and okay, I'm going to do append as new subtool just to make sure that something funky doesn't happen. That looks pretty good. So now what I can do is merge down. And now I have my labial palps. Now let's take another look and see scale-wise. They look a bit on the large size to me. So let's take a look at my reference again. It's really hard to tell because this is what I have right here. If that's the right size. I think what I'm going to do is I want to give them a bit of a... The other thing, I always have, I have no idea if this is right side up or upside down, to tell you the truth. There's no way of knowing from the picture. Let's make sure we have symmetry turned on. I'm just going to do like this. Something like this. I like to make this a little bit more prominent, just 'cause. Subdivide it again. I think I'm going to go to the glossy here. This bend that I put in last time I don't like, so I'm going to unbend it. So I'm just going to draw a mask right here. Actually, the other thing I could do, I could try doing the, let's save this first actually. Save. And while it's saving, we'll see if the email has shown up yet. Ah, yes, okay. Okay, so this is the this is your. Take a moment for looking at your stuff here. So if you're going to do stylized characters, I think this is a nice nice go at it. I think I'm going to recommend that you follow Letitia Gillette. Proud to say she's a former student of mine, but she's also amazing. And she does a lot of this kind of stuff. I see Letitia. This is her art station. And I believe she has some stuff on the Gnomon Workshop as well. Letitia Gillette. She's fantastic. And has done some really good stuff and has some great lessons on doing stylized characters. Which is something I enjoy doing, but I certainly I don't have her level of expertise. She's also really good at doing portraits. So one thing you could do is like, this is a great portrait she did of Jane Goodall, and it's a really fantastic caricature because not only did she manage to capture a likeness that's instantly recognizable as Jane Goodall, it's also stylized. So it's a little bit of a double trick there. So what I would say is this is a really cool beginning to do a stylized character. So I think the next step would be to do a stylized character of a realistic person, either a character from a movie, or personality, something that everybody knows. And it would also be nice to do a non-bald character, just so we can see your skills doing hairstyles, and they don't have to be complicated. If you look at her, Jane Goodall, it's not super complex hair. It's just very simple geometry with some extra strands. I'm not sure if she's done a paint over here or she's actually rendered the hair. Stylized portrait, so. But she also does more like, here's a good example. Stylized hair. This is not hard to do. It's not. Nothing in here is anything more difficult than what you've done. It's just much bit more refined, and it's also, also got the whole body. But the hair in itself, there's nothing really too difficult about the geometry. What I would say is another thing you could do is a wider range of facial expressions. So add some other views that have other facial expressions. And then another thing you might want to check out is, it's hard to like critique anatomy with stylized characters because they are stylized, in their nature. But I would say take a look at this. So you got a nice arc going right here. I think the chin might be interfering with it a little bit too much. It's not that the chin's coming out. It might be coming out a little bit too far. It might also be up a little bit too high, so it's interfering with the slope that you have in the face, because you really want to have that. If you're going to do an underbite, right? So his lower lip is coming out further than his upper lip, so that's an underbite. But if you look at the teeth, the lower jaw, he has an overbite with the teeth, but an underbite with the lips. So that needs to be resolved somehow. I don't think it can be both at the same time. I would say maybe if you're going to do an underbite like this kind of thing, then have his teeth come out. It's going to change his personality a bit, but I think it'll sort of help solve some of the sort of anatomical issues that you're having with the face there. And I don't want to mess with this too much because I like the sharp contrast of the nose coming out, but maybe have a little bit more of an angular angle for the brow, just slight. So look at some good head drawing, even though it's realistic anatomy. Some good head drawing tutorials will help with that. This is a cool concept. What I'd like to see on this is I'd like to see a texture or a significant textural difference between the eye and the rest of the body, because we have lots of muscle and skin here and veins and gross looking stuff. But the eye looks like flesh. It doesn't look like an eye. If you really want it to be impressive and scare the heck out of people and look original, make this eye look more like an actual eye. Make it separate geometry so that it's actually sitting within the eyelid, and create a real iris and an actual lens with some transparency on it, because that's what's going to be more grabbing. And I would say, you know, make it look like there's actual muscles and eyelids that would make these guys blink, because that would be much more horrifying and give it more personality. Right now they kind of like they're in suction cups, and this is not like a perfect sphere. So I would say for this one, because the whole trick right here, this is all about the eyes, right? Just like all about the base. This whole character, everything else is just supporting the fact that this is a multi-eyed freakish life form, right? So really get those eyes nailed, make them look, you know, I know it's like, even if you're making this out of one piece of geometry for the topology, make those eyes a different material so they really stand out as eyes. This should be a much brighter, sharper specular highlight. And if there's a little bit of refraction there over the lens, that tends to make it look cooler. So that's what I'd say on that one. This one's cool, but I'm not sure what's going on here. You know, it's like, I know it's like read the description, but you really want to have, like, people should be able to recognize what you're trying to do within a split second. You know what I mean? So if this is really muscles, you know, over a skeleton, make it look like muscles over a skeleton. This looks, this would be like if this was carved in clay and somebody found it in a cave, like a prehistoric kind of thing, that would be okay, because it looks like prehistoric kind of attempt at doing anatomy. But if you're trying to do a real monster, you know, and also this, I think the cross should be pointed so we have an understanding how it got through that muscle tissue, and maybe, you know, spreading the muscles apart a little bit so it looks like an actual wound. But I would say go back over this and make the muscles look more defined. And it's not just striations, they actually have to have form to them. This guy is pretty good as well. There's some weird stuff going on here. Look at your forearm anatomy, your biceps, how it attaches to the pectoralis muscles. Sorry, I'm an insect guy, so I'm going to mispronounce everything. I mean, it's nice, you know, if you're going to show the topology here, you could make this a lot lower topology. You could probably get this subdivided down even by another level, because if I'm seeing the wireframe, I'm not seeing a whole lot of detail, but I'm seeing a fairly dense wireframe. So make that, you know, bring that geometry down even another level. They make it more obvious where the joints are. Give it a little bend here in the leg, the knees sticking out, that kind of thing. Again, this is something where it's like really studying human anatomy and musculature would really be helpful, because, you know, check out John Brown, his tutorials in the Gnomon Workshop. You know, la 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 la. John Brown, a traditional sculptor. He has several great tutorials on the Gnomon Workshop. He's been in the industry forever, and he has a great way of approaching teaching anatomy, which is really worth checking out. I don't know why it's not showing his videos. There we go. They're just too far down here. So check out some of these sculptures. Even though he's doing it in clay, that's fine. It's still the same thing. And his approach to teaching anatomy in his videos is really, really fantastic. The planes of the head, armature, femme fatale, those are all good videos. Sculpting comic book style. Check those out, because, you know, has an approach that makes anatomy a lot easier, focusing on the lines and that kind of stuff. And then this one, you know, it's cool. Again, it's a stylized character, but I'd like to see more. Like if this is supposed to be a female character, it's hard to tell. So that right there is a problem, because if this is supposed to be breasts, they should look like breasts. They look like something between a pectoral muscle and a breast. I'm not sure which. So anatomy, I think it comes down to anatomy. And also rocks, you know, if you're sculpting rocks, make them look like rocks. Even if they're stylized rocks, they should have This looks like something in between. Are we doing curved or are we doing angular? Pick a side. Because if this is going to be stylized and low polygon, then you want to look, these could be lower polygon. And if you're going to do something like this, you could always, there are plenty of stuff on Fab. You could grab some rocks there or sculpt. I've done a lot of rock sculpting. I could just sculpt rocks for Star Trek Beyond. So sculpting rocks for Star Trek is the most Star Trek thing you could do. And this is pretty cool. Again, I think I'd like to see, this is topology right here. You've got like a triangle, or sorry, a quad right here. I'd really like to see a division that goes straight down the middle. If it's a symmetrical character, it should be split right in half, right in the middle. This side should be exactly symmetrical with this side. Right now you've got kind of a wandering line here, and there's no reason to have this kind of topology on such a symmetrical character. It should be just straight down. Because this is going to be an issue with rigging and texturing and other things. It would give us a more defined knee. Otherwise, if I was rigging this for animation, I don't know where to put the knee there. It's going to be very difficult to do a walk cycle with this guy. This could be lower topology too. You don't need that much geometry for such a simple piece. And the texturing is okay, but if we look at the shadowings, he's got a belly. So this is kind of a weird shadow to have for belly. So the texture says belly, but this shadow right here, it's kind of odd. I would expect to see something that looks more spherical here if he's got a belly. So, and then another thing, the texturing right here in this render, if I'm looking at it straight on, I can't tell if that's going in or out. Is there geometry there? That, what's going on with the inside of his mouth? It looks like he's got something blocking his throat. So I would say make it obviously more of a cavity. Again, that's going to be something that would be difficult to rig. And the profile, I like to see a bit more of a skull. This looks a little bit like a gumdrop. I want to see more of a brow and then coming down here. So again, planes of the face. So okay, so I hope that's kind of helpful just as a real quick portfolio review. I tend not to do as much portfolio reviews in my live stream. I usually do focus more on the insect sculpting, but I hope that's given you some ideas. Okay. So what was I doing? Okay, I was just about to bend this. So let's take a look at the Anchor Classic. Rotate here, see if this will work. Sometimes it does a pretty good job. Nope. That's good. And then we can use the brush and smooth that. Remember last week I actually showed how I extruded this part. So I don't want to smooth it too much because I don't want to lose that shape. Let's go back a little bit. Let's try this again. Yeah, I'd say there's so many great resources for anatomy out there that I think your humanoid characters would help a lot if you did more anatomical studies. It's the same thing that we all do. And anatomy is going to be something that you study for the rest of your life. It's not going to be something that you can do for a few months and say, I'm done. I mean, I've been doing insects for like 10 years now, and there's so much I don't know, as I'm demonstrating tonight, how little I know about mouthparts. And even human, it's really funny because I remember when the Andrew Krause's famous human model came out, which I have sitting on the other side of the studio. My wife is using it right now. I remember when that came out, and I got mine. I had 2 of them for a while. I gave one to my brother. But when it came out, I was like, that's it. I don't have to study anatomy anymore. I have the answers right in front of me. I just put this sculpture on the desk, look at the muscles, and there we go. I'm all done. Sell the anatomy books. Boy, was I wrong. I've spent so many hours with that thing, sculpting in clay, sculpting with, and I still every once in a while do characters, and I want to get back into doing more character work because I love it. And it just makes your brain do backflips. Even though you think it's right there. Like, it's the same thing I was saying with insects. You can have an insect under a microscope in front of you and still not know what you're looking at. It just takes a lot of study in life drawing classes, which I haven't done in a very long time. I should get back into it. One of the things that really helped me with insects is doing macro photography, getting out in the field with bugs, and also with entomologists and asking questions and learning from that crowd, and just being in the environment where insects live. I think that's one of the big problems that people ask me what the problems I see in insect sculpts or creature design, and I think that a lot of times you can tell when somebody has just done a Google image search and kind of kit bashed a bunch of bugs together that look cool and not really understanding the insect, where it lives, where it inhabits, how it relates to its environment, and when you see somebody's actually done a really good job of it, it shows. I think, Starship Troopers still holds up even after years. It's still ridiculous kind of B-movie, intentionally B-movie satire in a way. But man, those designs really hold up really well, even after all these years, because they look like they belong where you can tell instantly from the insect what kind of life it leads, where the rank is in the insect army, and all that kind of stuff. It's just, there's a connection with its environment that makes sense without even having to know much about it, And another one of my favorite insects or creatures is from the Peter Jackson King Kong, the giant bugs that rip people apart in the valley. That was, even for me, that was kind of intense, but it was well done, But I don't like when I see it more in video games and movies. But I can't stand when it just looks like somebody took this part of a mantis and put it on a spider and then added some muscles and big grizzly teeth and some armor parts and some spikes and said, look, there's my insect thing. And I'm just like, it doesn't look like anything. Look at how, this is just a really remedial version of the mouth parts, but still, look at how you can see their function. You get a good sense of what this bee is doing. It's extracting nectar from a flower. And if you watch bees and watch videos of them drinking, it's really truly amazing how their mouth parts work. It's easy to find that kind of stuff on honeybees. It's a little bit harder for bumblebees. Not too bad, but now that I'm in Europe, there are many more bumblebees here than there were in California, believe it or not. So I just need to break out the old camera and go to the backyard and take some more pictures. But macro photography for insects is like life drawing for character artists, You also learn a lot about lighting and composition because everything is instantaneous when you're taking it. You learn a lot about yourself as an artist when you do photography, because you're paying attention to how you see the world and how they see the environment. So I highly recommend it. And it doesn't have to be super expensive. You can do a lot of great photography with minimal equipment, or even an iPhone if you wanted to. There's like a whole world of smartphone macro photography out there. Okay, so I think this is I'm going to leave the mouth parts there for now and maybe come back to it in a bit. And I think what I'd like to do now is, since I want to have this model textured and rendered with fur and everything, is I'm going to start poly painting it. So I'm going to work on the poly paint for the next half hour on this model. And the nice thing about this guy as well, he's mostly, this guy or girl, mostly covered in fur. So we got mostly black, and there are bits of yellow, but they're all hidden under the fur. But you know, depending on how you do the fur, of course, a lot of the fur color can come from the textures you paint on the model, depending on the fur that you're using. Like in Yeti, I would paint a fur map that may not be seen on the model, but it would determine the color of the fur fibers. But we do see, you know, I mean, there's some coloration in here. There's definitely some very dim yellows and some browns and some blues in here. It's not just straight up black, flat black. So there's a lot of subtlety in here, but at the same time, compared to some other models I've done, it's not as complicated. This bee is a picture of a dead bee, so these eyes are somewhat desiccated, so I would not use that for eye reference. I would look at some, if you notice the living bees, the blacks are much darker, but you can see there's a little bit of coloration on the joints here, you know, and then of course the wings as well. Here's a good picture. Right down here we can see we start to have color variation. And this is the actual pollen basket, so that's not part of the bee. But you can see the hairs here that are clinging to it. That's the severed head. Alas, poor Yorick. So, not an intricate paint job by any means, so that's good. Compared to, here's the honeybees. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to put this down here like this. And I'm going to switch to this. And let's start with the head. And I'm going to set my background color to gray. And let's go into subtools. Make sure everything's at the highest subdivision level. Turn on poly paint. Switch my color to black. And color fill object. Black. There we go. So sorry, I got allergies. Making my eye freak out. Let's go in here and do a little masking. So I'm going to do cavity mask. It's going to be hard to see because it's black. And then I'm going to pick maybe, I think this is blue because it's reflecting the sky, but I still like to put a little bit of dark blue in there and mix it in with some brown. It's like at this phase, I'm gonna like throwing paint on the canvas so that I can start to squish around and stuff. So let's set the RGB intensity a bit lower. I'll choose color, fill object. So you can see I'm getting sort of blue on the outside, but that's also making the details come out a little bit more. And then I'm gonna get a little bit of reddish brown black in here as well. And for this, I'll go down to mask by smoothness. And let's invert that mask and hide it. And I'll choose color, fill object. That's gonna be pretty subtle. I mean, honestly, I don't know if I need to do much more than that for this, you know. This is gonna be a lot of roughness textures that I'll paint in substance. I like to do the base color in ZBrush and then augment it in Substance. Let's do mask by curvature. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. We're getting some of the detail coming through. Again, it's going to be really subtle, and this is plugged into a shader. That color is going to be super, super subtle. It's going to mostly look black. But I just don't know if I need to do more than that, honestly. I mean, I can do black in some of these areas just straight up. Just take the paintbrush. And I'm going to hold the shift key and turn off the add. Make sure that I have symmetry turned on. Just paint some behind the ocelli. I think what I might do is getting some eyeshadow here. Makeup for bees. Should be doing this on TikTok, I guess. No, I think if I do any more, it's going to mess it up. So I'm going to leave it at that. That's head done. For now. Ocelli. We're going to keep those flat back, black, so just two color. Object. The eyes. Polypaint. Make sure we don't have any masks on there. For textures. Word surface noise. That's the problem. Surface noise. Okay. Okay, I think those are just reflectivity artifacts. So I'm going to go in here and do masking. Mask by cavity. You can see I just raised up some of that dark bluish color, but I still have black in the cavities here, so that kind of makes the ommatidia slightly, these lenses here, a little bit more obvious. Extra mouth part. Yeah, this bee is definitely super black. and glean some details from the dead version. You just don't want to go overboard with copying this because it's going to look like a dead bee. But let's take the antenna and fill that with black. I'm going to select this color just by hovering over and pressing C. And I'll choose color, object. So yeah, a little bit of details. And then I'm going to clear the mask. And on this one, I'm just going to get like just a little touch of a very dark, let's call it umber kind of color. And lower my RGB intensity. Paintbrush to color spray, set my color variation down fairly low. Tap opacity like this. Make sure we got symmetry turned on. I'm going to clear the mask and just do a little bit of a brush. Let's turn the lazy mouse off. Yeah, bring on the RGB intensity a little bit more. Make it a little bit more orange. This is the kind of stuff that is going to be very subtle in the final shader, but you know, in some of these thinner parts, we're going to want to have some subsurface coming through here, just a little bit on this guy. So painting a lighter color here will help to draw the attention to the joints and make it look a bit more visually interesting than just having something flat black. I might have to make this a little bit more exaggerated on this version of the model because I know from experience that this stuff, you can think it's like super bright in the poly paint phase, even in the base color, and then when you throw it on the material and everything else, it just starts to get lost. The thing that I don't want to have is just a complete flat black obsidian-like bee. It's a cool concept, but it's going to make everything look like a shadow, piece of metal or something. So just put these little, right here in the division of the joints, a little bit lighter color to make it look a bit more interesting. And these are not particularly hairy antenna, so there's just maybe a few hairs here and there. I could even get some yellow in there. I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing? Finally got around to doing this on a regular basis, although I had to sign up for my times for next month. So I'm usually here on Mondays at this time. I'm on European time, so it's almost 11 p.m. for me. I don't want to get psychedelic here. Just do a little bit here and there. I'm going to go back in black. Sorry, AC/DC. And just darken this a little bit. And get some of that yellow back in here. I know I'm spending a lot of time with these antenna. I think it's worth it. Just hitting it with a little bit of yellow in there on top of the red and the purple. And I'll do something similar with the legs. And I have symmetry on, so this is going to look super symmetrical. But I can always, go back and make it less symmetrical. I just want to save time by getting some paint on both sides of the model first, and then I'll go back and retouch some things. But, it sticks out now, but that's okay, because like I said, the final shader, it's going to be really subtle. I'm going to go to the base of the antenna here. And I think there's a really nice... There's a better one than that in here somewhere. As you can see, there's some reddishness right here in the joint. This yellow right here is mostly hair, I think, and also some desiccation. So I'm not going to paint these parts yellow. little bit of red going there. Red and yellow in there in that joint part. Go to the head though. These parts where the model starts to get thin, getting some slightly lighter colors, and I can plug that into the subsurface. Again, it's going to be very subtle on this particular bug because it's so dark in color and so hairy, but subtlety is where it's all at, you know. Remember when subsurface technology, rendering technology first became popularized, every character had bright glowing ears because everybody was overdoing it. It's kind of funny. This division is not something that I have in here. I mean, I sort of have it, but let's take a look at some other bug pictures. It's something I need to bring back in. I lost it somehow. The reference is tough to really get a good image of it. Some yellow in there. bit. Mask by cavity. Yeah, looking pretty cool. He says some of this stuff is going to be pretty subtle in the final render. There you go. That's what I'm going to do for today. And then next week, work on this a bit more. And also going to finish up that Katydid model. And I have a longhorn beetle somewhere on a hard drive that's kind of unfinished as well. So more bugs to work with in the coming weeks. I hope you enjoyed this live stream, and I hope to see you guys next week. Thanks for all the great questions and also the tips on the insect anatomy, which I really appreciate. And I'll see you next time.